Hello everybody! Hope you're having a wonderful week and are celebrating a lovely Remembrance Day today. It's definitely something we should be celebrating every day, not just on November 11th. There are so many things within our life that we take for granted that people actually fought for, and they didn't have the help that they did back then, and especially mental illnesses and research and understanding like that. So, let's pay homage to them. Suffered a lot so that we could complain about not getting our coffee a specific temperature at Starbucks. So just remember that, those tiny little freedoms that we ourselves did not fight for. Anyway, let's get right into it. So this week we're going to be talking about abuse. So, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like that. It doesn't always have to result in bruising or cuts and scrapes or violence for it to be abuse. It can be as simple as the words and tactics some people are using in order to get their way. It's very common to see in narcissists or people that are just acting like brats, which are typically narcissists. But anyway, how they react and how they respond shows abuse, and how we can recognize even how we're abusing ourselves in certain ways, the self-sabotaging behavior, and to be able to see the results and effects of abuse in other people, especially in kids, because it can come out in different ways for everybody. And some people may not even recognize the fact that they are going through abuse or that have experienced abuse. Even some situations that I've been in, I didn't think it was bad until I told somebody, and the look on their face, they were like, that's not good, you should not be experiencing that. So we're just gonna get right into it. So just in Canada alone, 33% of people under the age of 15 have experienced some sort of childhood abuse. 30% of victims have family associated abuse or trauma. Their family has either abused them or they have seen some form of abuse. And 8% of people under the age of 15 have reported childhood sexual abuse. Now, these are the numbers that are reported. Could you imagine what the actual numbers are? Because most people, it's the victim blaming, right? They don't want to come forward. They feel really uncomfortable about the experience as it is. They don't want to talk about it. They don't know if it's abuse. They don't understand what even happened, especially as kids, because they think they should trust adults, and not all adults are trusting. Especially, we don't want to see it in, maybe some family members or some friends, but putting kids into unsafe situations around unsafe people is actually a form of abuse. So again, it doesn't always have to be physical violence, and it doesn't always have to be we see abuse as the extreme. It has to be, somebody's getting put in a hospital, somebody's getting put into, or they're getting incarcerated over it. It doesn't matter. Abuse is abuse. There is always a spectrum. So there's the minimum and then there's the maximum, and there's all of this area in between. We're gonna go over that today. So we're gonna use, I like this playground analogy too. It kind of sets the standard for, as kids, how we experience certain things. So I'm sure most people my age and older have heard that. It's like, oh, if that person is mean to you, that means they like you. Don't tell kids that. What are you doing? That gives them this perception that if somebody is mean to them or treats them poorly, then they're supposed to vie for their affection, because then that means they like them. No, we do not operate like that. That person is being mean to them, you tell that kid or tell that person, this person likes you, but they are not able to communicate it properly, so don't go near them until they're emotionally capable to do so. But I think this kind of sets the precedent for how we see certain things. Or say somebody is mistreating us as a kid and we kind of stand up for ourselves, and our parents are like, oh, be polite. And you're like, oh, I thought that person was in the wrong. Why am I getting in trouble for it? Just because I'm going to be polite? No. Again, if somebody's making you uncomfortable or harassing you, tell them to F off. Even if you're a kid, you might get reprimanded by your parent, but don't ever, if it feels wrong to you, get out of it. You know, if you can, run away, block their number, all of those things. Even go to the police. Sometimes police aren't exactly that helpful and it can cause more issues, but there are plenty of ways that you can get help, mental assistance, and, you know, abuse hotlines and stuff are way more intricated into our society now than they were before. So there are so many ways to help, and hopefully if it is happening to you or somebody that you know, you're able to find some help for that. So some forms of child abuse, like especially my generation too, like if your mom spanked you, you just never did it again. But that is a form of child abuse. If you're spanking or hitting a kid, if you're screaming at that kid, say you had a really shitty day, your kid is being loud, they are offending every single thing in your eardrum and you're screaming at them, that is also a form of abuse if it's consistent, right? Like one time thing, I don't know, but to do it constantly is a form of abuse. Negligent parenting, so if that person's never around, if they're not feeding their kids, if they're just not in that parental role very well, that is a form of abuse. Not feeding your child is a form of abuse. And again, you know, we're like that as kids too. You know, you're going to bed without dinner. That's a one-time thing. It's not constant. You're not spending money on drugs and alcohol and then not feeding your kid. Like that's kind of the difference. Introducing them to harmful or unsafe people is a form of abuse. And then family violence. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, them being violent to the kid, but exposing them to that violence. Say you and your partner are fighting all the time, say they're abusive to you, and the kids see that, it affects them mentally, and it is actually very traumatic for them. You probably hear the fireplace roaring in the background, so that's what that noise is. But if you just want to stop and take a picture or a screenshot of the effects of mistreatment and abuse, it's very helpful. You can do your own little bit of digging on this, but most commonly we see the behavioral issues and the learning issues in kids. And especially, this doesn't necessarily have the sexual abuse for kids on it, but these are all signs somebody has had some form of abuse. Just because somebody shows these types of signs doesn't necessarily mean they have experienced some type of abuse, but these are telltale signs that somebody has had abuse. Remember, correlation is not causation. Remember that. So those are many of the signs that people have had abuse. The sexual abuse thing, especially in kids, if they are, so you go to dress them and they're really uncomfortable with you near certain parts of their body. So you go to put on their pants and they're like really uncomfortable about it, or you go to like, you know, put on their sweater, or you dry them off and they're really sensitive to certain, you know, you near certain areas, that could very well be a sign of sexual abuse too. Taking them to a doctor to get all that sorted out could be a very helpful sign too, if you're seeing that, even if it's not abuse, maybe they're having other issues, right? So that is important to check out. Another thing for like self-abuse, if you're engaging in very risky sexual behavior, if you're abusing substances for any type of reason, that's probably because you have some semblance of trauma, and maybe gotta do the shadow work. In my other video, I have a link to that. It's awesome. Talk to a therapist, talk to a mental health specialist, anything like that. It can be very helpful, and it's things that we don't realize that we have until somebody says that out loud, or we read it and we're like, oh, okay. So those are just some of the things. Is probably something we're going to come back to as well, because it is such a huge topic, but hopefully these little things can help out for right now. I hope everyone is having a lovely week, and I will see you all next week for another health class. I love you all, and I can't wait for next week. Bye.